Hey, it's Ryan Speltz, and welcome back to the REConnect Podcast. Today, I've got Connor Bartley, and I'm super excited about this one because we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective in someone that is involved in the real estate market, but not necessarily in the day-to-day like most of the people that we've met to this point. And so, Connor, thanks for coming on. And when I asked you what your purpose is in one sentence before the show, you said, "My purpose is to make friends and to help my friends." And so I'm excited to explore where that came from. So take it away and kind of tell us how you developed that.
Sure. So I've been recruiting, which is what I do, for 16 years, 17 years. And what I've developed over time is really just this understanding that, especially when you're in recruiting salespeople and there's a longer sales cycle and there's the trust factor involved, and it's not as transactional as staffing, where you might interview somebody and then send them off to a job same day. But really just that building of a relationship to earn trust and to have a foundation of how you can provide value to that person and understanding what their needs are, whether or not they come to work for your specific company, right? In this business in particular, having a network of friends that you can connect with each other, that you can add value to, and they can add value to each other. That there's a group that will collaborate with one another, have accountability sessions with each other. Like that's really valuable, especially in an industry like ours where it's easy to feel isolated and sort of on your own. So when you asked that question, and I really gave it a lot of thought, I really did. To make it as simply, or to put it as simply as I could, it really is. I want to make friends with as many people in this industry as I can, and find ways to help them. And that could be in a lot of different ways. I mean, that could be just making a connection with another person from my network that I know has been on a similar journey that that person is on. If someone's trying to find a way to work their database, for example, and find an extra deal a month out of there. If I know somebody who's been on that journey and is really good at that, I want to connect those two so that they can help that person accelerate their growth. If it's I listened to a podcast and I picked up a clever idea from it that someone hasn't heard, I want to share that with somebody else. If it's exploring your career path to find out what other resources or support might be available to you, then that's another way I can help. There's really no limit to the kind of help someone can provide another person. It's just about understanding what those needs are and really being intentional and having the conversation to uncover those. And so that sort of captured it all, I thought. And so that's my purpose.
I think you emulate exactly what you said there, very, very well. As you know, obviously we only know each other from really LinkedIn there and kind of communicating and connecting there and interacting. And I say just, but that's how a lot of my strongest relationships have been from is social media. So, I don't want to downplay that at all, but I think you really do that where you're constantly just putting out value for somebody that is a loan officer or a branch manager that's not really trying to recruit. How would you encourage them to do the same? Because I know that that's a huge hurdle for a lot of people is how do you just give up everything, right? Like how do you like if you have a strategy that's working, oftentimes in business you're told, well, keep it to yourself and just run with it as long as you can. But in the mortgage world, I feel like the more collaboration we get, the better it's going to be. How do you
Mm-hmm.
communicate that, or how do you encourage those people to do that?
So, what I encourage is that you find a few other of your peers in your market and put together a group. Meet once a month, meet twice a month, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with. But find other peers that are in a similar range of production to yourself, or maybe you've got some on the lower end, some on the higher end, right? But openly share those things, because in the end, if all, and this is not a knock on what a company can provide a loan officer, but every company's got their own unique differences, right? And they look at the business through their own unique lens. And so if the only perspective you're getting is from where you work, then you might be missing out on a valuable perspective that someone else has that could just tweak something in your head slightly that makes you go, maybe I should try it this way. And so I would always encourage loan officers to reach out to the other loan officers in their market that they can get together with, break bread with, share their, best practices, commiserate a little, whatever it may be, but find some community within the community and build that out for yourself. There's a lot of coaches out there, and they add a ton of value to loan officers. And there's a lot of great advice being given, but just that one-to-one or a small group can really be valuable for you. I've set that up myself with some loan officers throughout Texas and Oklahoma, and we've met twice so far this year, and it's just awesome to hear the ideas get shared. No one's dogging anybody's idea. Nobody's, it's not a time to put anybody down. It's just, hey, I tried that and it didn't work, and what I would have done differently is this, right? Or have you tried doing it this way yet? And so those are the kinds of things that I would encourage any loan officer to really, that's where I would start.
Yeah, that's a great starting place. And you mentioned the kind of mastermind, I guess, would be the classic term for that, right? Now you told me a little stat before the show, and I've got to have you brag about it a little bit, because I think you've got
Sure.
some pretty crazy numbers in that group. Like you were saying, like, oh yeah, we met a couple times and things were good. Like tell us about it, because that, like,
Yeah.
when you bragged about it earlier, it was awesome.
Yeah, so it's not huge. I'm not going to say that like we're building some global network here yet, right? But I started by reaching out to people over LinkedIn that were in the DFW area, which is where I'm at, Dallas Fort Worth. And initially it was, hey, let's get together. And out of 80 messages I sent, I had over 40 that were like, yes, I would be interested. And then I thought a little bit more on it, and that's a little big. That's a lot. And so if you get 40, 50 people together, that becomes overwhelming. And do you really get a lot out of it? So I shifted and went to these smaller groups of 3 to 5 people is who's meeting. But we had yesterday, I'm running them on the third Wednesday of the month, and we just discuss a different topic each month. Yesterday I had 14 people join. The average producer in that group was funding 72 units and 24 million in last 12 months production. So these are good producers that are really not afraid to share what they're going through. And that's honestly kind of a trend that I've seen in our business, Ryan, is, and that's where I kind of came with the solo versus polo acronyms, which is the solution-oriented loan officer is seeking knowledge, is sharpening their skills. They want to add value to themselves and to their referral partners and their borrowers, and they're open collaborators. They're willing to do that. And then the polos, your problem obsessed loan officers, tend to be a little more focused on the problem. It's high rates, it's low inventory, it's this, it's that, and not necessarily. And then they hold on and they safely guard whatever idea that they have. And while that may work for them, it might be costing them a lot, because there's a lot to gain from the ideas and the knowledge of others in this business. And a lot of people are willing to share it, and if you're willing to do what's worked for them, it could mean a lot of extra business for you. So that's always my recommendation, is go out there and seek out other avenues or other ideas.
Yeah, and that's really why I wanted you to brag about the numbers there, was like to show, because I think a lot of people, especially as loan officers, you say that 72 number, and there's a guy that funded 6 loans last year going, how in the hell do we do that? Right. And then to recognize that, that guy that is funding 72, and you said that's average, so that means there's probably somebody in that group that's doing 120 and somebody doing 50. And those two guys are talking and communicating with each other. And I bet the guy that's doing 50 is doing something different than the guy that's doing 120. And the guy that 120 is like, yeah, here you go, take it. I want you to do this, because there's enough for everybody. And so, that's the message that I was like, that's why I was pushing it so much. It's like, you got to be able to see that it's possible to fund that many loans. And it's the way to do it is to just be open and start sharing.
Right. It's an abundance mentality. And yeah, it's awesome to be a part of. That's why I highly suggest everybody, go find your group, and you'll see the value in it. And top producers, they know what they've done was hard. And so not everybody's going to do it, right? And that's
Yeah.
the other safety in sharing your big ideas, is that, not everybody's going to put in that same level of work, but at the same time, if you do 20%, you might get, a small return on that. So
Yeah, and everybody's kind of scared of losing what they have as a prize, right? But what you don't recognize is that even if you're doing it at a higher level, like, social media, for instance, just as an example, if you're doing social media at a high level, you're so far ahead of the guy that you're telling this information, or the girl that you're telling this information to anyway. And so you can tell them all of the things that you've messed up on, and they may get a little closer to you. But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're continually evolving and growing, and they're just always going to be playing catch up anyway. They're not stealing from you. They could be
right,
your neighbor and they're not stealing from you, because they're never going to do it as effectively as you've done it. And it's so that, if you're afraid of sharing, that's a little bit of a comfort, like you said, is like, it's just, they're never going to catch up to what you're doing.
right, right. It's the iPhone versus everyone else, right? They came out first. They're just always a little bit more advanced. Oof. And so they just keep the lead, and I don't know if you're Android or whatever.
Yeah, we could go down that path for a while if you want, but maybe not on the day that AT&T goes down. It's a little sensitive for some people right now. So that's funny. So obviously in your position, it can kind of feel like you're not experiencing a lot of different things every day. If you're doing the same kind of things over and over again, how do you keep that, how do you stay within your purpose in that? And how do you keep yourself pushing forward when, you said it's a long sales cycle? How are you continually putting that energy out and creating and staying consistent?
So for me, something that's very helpful that I really just sort of settled into maybe a year and a half ago or so is really just being theming out my days, right? Like, I don't want to always call the same producer every day, and I don't want to call at random every day either, right? Like, if there's a mix there, but if I can say, hey, I want to be very specific about the group of individuals I want to reach out to today, and these are the things that I have noticed are trends of what they're interested in, or the things that are going to be helpful to their business, or this might be, something that would bring value to that group of individual. And then that just helps me stay on pace for that day. If I'm constantly shifting gears and I go, oh man, there's a high VA producer. Okay. And then this is a top producer, a top 1%, or here's a branch manager. If I'm constantly shifting throughout the course of a day, that can get really confusing. And it can also lead you to sort of settle into a groove of going through the motions. And so I like to get into just these thematic days that help me stay very focused on, the archetype for that day. And then, I've done this a long time, Ryan. So I've worked the same territory for 7 years almost. And so I know a lot of these people really well. Like, we've talked for a long time. And so that's another piece that helps vary it up for me, is just having those catch-up calls with folks and reaching out to see how they're progressing towards their goals, and celebrating with them and getting excited, and and then just making sure that they're okay. I was in church last Sunday, and we were going through Philippians. Anyway, the pastor made a comment that said, if you're okay, I'm okay. And that's a lot of how I feel as a recruiter, is like, if you're doing good, I'm happy with that. Like, I've never been, and I say this to a lot of people, I will never argue with you about where you should work. Because that's not that's not for me to say. That's, it's a personal decision, those types of things. So, but I always want to make sure that the person that I'm talking to is okay with what they have. And if they want to explore things, we can pull back the curtain. We can talk a little bit about that, and maybe it leads to more conversation. But in the end, I think if you got 80% of your needs met, my professional advice is stay where you're at. If you got 80 or more of your needs met, you're crushing it. If you're between 50 and 80, you might want to put a feeler out. And if it's under 50%, move on. But anyway, sorry, long answer to your question. I apologize for that. But yeah,
I think that's great to, in that focus of, to put it in just a slightly different tone, is you've released the expectation of a result as you as a person going in through a day to day. You're not hinging on, okay, today I've got to have, you may have a number of conversations you want to have, but even in the conversations, the outcome is just to have a conversation and to interact and to develop a relationship and continue that conversation and set an expectation that, hey, I'm going to continue to reach out because I think you're a cool guy and I want to interact with you, or just stuff like that. And I think that a lot of agents get hung up, and I say agents, but lenders as well, and they get hung up on that. Like, I've got to have the result. And by doing that, by chasing that result, they're actually pushing it farther and farther away.
Right.
I mean, we see it rampant in the real estate market right now where, 49% of agents closed 0 or 1 deal as a real estate agent last year. And I haven't found the statistic for the loan officers because those somehow just get a little bit more hidden for us. But I'm sure there's a stat
I've
out
got
there
it.
that it probably says like 30%, right? Like,
it was it's from Ingenious, and it was only 24% of loan officers last year funded 2 or more loans a month.
that's crazy. And and we look out and I fit in that box, ironically, that does that. We had some different focuses and we were shifting around and things went that way. And obviously with the market, it was probably not the greatest time to make a leap when I did last year, but it worked out for me and now we're here. But that's kind of it's such a, if you're chasing only the transaction, you're only going to get the transaction.
Right.
And laying that across your as a transactional loan officer, it's constant. Like, you have to go and find new leads. That's why those people are always asking, where are you finding leads? Where are you getting leads? It's like,
right.
Well, dude, you helped 24 families last year. Why aren't you calling them and asking them where their friends are? Like, because you didn't actually establish a relationship. So, I like I've really started to focus on like how everything's kind of similar, whether you're a real estate agent or a lender. And I ended up going to a real estate conference and just watching them present, and their presentations set up like a listing presentation for them. Like, they start slow and then they build up and then they show their value and how that applies. And it's the same thing with a sales conversation, recruiting,
Right.
like all of these conversations are just the same at different levels. And being able to understand that, if you let go of the ending and just let it be what it is and just develop the relationship, things turn out so much better.
Absolutely. I wrote a post about that the other day, in that mortgage recruiting, it's a very difficult job. If you don't understand what you're getting, like if you don't know the rules of the game, you're going to get very frustrated very fast. I got into it from the world of staffing, where I mentioned earlier, I might interview someone in my office today, send them to a client same day, they have an interview, and then they stay the rest of the day and they're hired and they show up again tomorrow, right? Like, so very quick. Mortgage recruiting, if no one tells you, it might take months, maybe years, before that person comes and joins your company. You get frustrated, because you start to wonder, is it me? Is it something I'm saying? Should I push a little harder? What do I need to do differently to speed this thing along? I've got bills to pay and those types of things. And so it is that attachment to the outcome, and the outcome focus for me is just, I want to earn the right to talk to you again. I want to make a good impression. Those are the things that move the needle for me. And if I can walk away and know, hey, I can call Ryan back and he'll take my call and I'm not saved in the phone as do not answer, that's a win, man. So
that's I think you've got definitely a developed plan there, and then you can see it and just in your posting, like you mentioned, and in your marketing. Like, you're not out there just like text slamming people and sending the same freaking message over and over again. Like, the amount of times that there's like a phone number that shows up and it's like copy and pasted, or they call and leave a voicemail and it's pre-recorded and you get the same message 4 times. It's like, can we do better, please? Like, this is awful. And that loan officers are out there doing it to real estate agents too. Like, because that's the way it works, is like, we got to get speed. Numbers is the game. Well, numbers is the game, but if you take quality over quantity, you're going to win every time, because you might not get 20 loan officers, but if you go sign 20 loan officers tomorrow, I bet 12 of them are probably leaving because you got too much at one time and you can't service them,
Yeah. And so, full transparency, Ryan, like, I used to be one of those guys. I've never denied it. I have to own that because that's, part of my journey. But yeah, that was an evolution for me. I felt like I did need to do the, automated message, the slide broadcast voicemail, and drop it in and try to get 100 of those out a day, and plus this and do that, and just, numbers, numbers, numbers. And but then I had to come to that realization that, hey, this is a career for me, and I'm treating this like a job, and I want to do this for a long time. And if I'm going to be successful at it, I can't get blocked by everybody. I mean, I can't just end up on someone's call block list. So yeah, that was something that really, yeah, I couldn't exactly pinpoint the moment when, but yeah, that was a trigger for me where I said, okay, yeah, I've really got to switch up what I'm doing, because I'm risking too much by taking this approach with too little reward. Like, the risk reward didn't make sense. And I've just found it's a lot easier for me to just chat with people and have fun. I mean, when you start having fun with this gig, it's a lot better. It's a lot easier, honestly.
Yeah, and you got to enjoy the conversation. And I think you do a very good job of taking direct interest in others, which makes them be interested in you. I mean, like your High Five Friday thing, like, so cool. Like, you're one of those things you're just like, damn, I
Appreciate
wish I
that.
did it first, kind of thing. You're
Bam.
like looking back, yeah, like you're punching the camera and then like getting people to interact, and that's how we met. You tagged me randomly. I didn't even know you were there, and we
Yeah,
were there. So I think there's a lot of good that you're putting out into the world, and that comes back, and I know you've seen the results of that. So getting a little long, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up with the big question. So,
sure, sure.
I did prepare you beforehand, and sorry to the people I've already interviewed that I didn't prepare. I know I sprung it on you, but I'm getting better. So I want to ask you, what is one global issue, and as big or as small as you want to make it, what is one global issue that you'd like to solve or be able to work on and help out with?
Sure. So what I came up with for that was just really taking the time to understand each other. I think ignorance, it leads to a lot of jumping to conclusions. And if you take the time to listen, to understand, to really try to, walk in someone else's shoes, um, you can really evolve as a person. And if we all took the time to do that, I think, the world could be a better place, sort of thing. But yeah, I think there's just so much like prejudging and bias and things out there that leads to just some unnecessary stress and frustration. And in the end, we're all people trying to do the best that we can. So understanding other people, I think, would be that for me.
So if you were to give somebody step one, they recognize like, oh, I didn't give that guy a fair chance. How would you recommend that on the next time they approach that conversation so that they're not doing the same thing?
I mean, it could just be as simple as asking a question and stopping and listening to their answer. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in this? What's your journey along this path? And then shut up and listen, and really try to follow what it is they have to say, and ask more questions, and try to understand. So, step one would just be to ask a question, shut up, and listen.
I think that's a great first step, and that's very actionable. So appreciate you giving a little insight into what you would do to help get closer to that. So, Connor, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today and spending some time with our listeners. And if you want to interact with Connor, like I said, the most place that I've found him is LinkedIn, and he's very, very prevalent, and he's all over it every single day, and he's always got good content putting out. So whether you're mortgage or real estate, definitely a good follow to go talk to and go interact with. So
Appreciate it, Ryan.